Hello everyone, this is Rupkinranjan Bhattacharjee. Now, this class will be on the second part of the fundamental aspects of economics. Here we will be learning few important aspects. One is production possibility frontier. This is PPF. Second, we will have a relationship between product market, factor market, consumers, and business firms. This relationship is very important to look into. Then we can have curve, demand curve, supply curve, and ultimately it will lead us to the equilibrium. We'll ultimately notify these things as we will move on. And the fourth one is market failures. Market failures and government response. Market failures and government response. So in this lecture, we'll be looking into the production possibility frontier curve, then a relationship between product market, factor market, consumers and firms. This is very important. And then we can have curves like demand curve, supply curve, and then equilibrium. And lastly, there is market failures. And based on the market failures, government's responses. Come to the first point, that is PPF. PPF. PPF means production possibility frontier. So it means what is the amount of a certain item that can be produced by an economy. So an economy is there. It signifies the amount of a certain product. Say for an example, an item. How much? The maximum amount. What is the maximum amount that can be produced by an economy? A certain item. That is signified by PPF. Here we have some prerequisite conditions. We have prerequisite condition. That is, first one is technology of that economy is fixed. We know that every economy has a set or a certain fixed limitations based on its technology, and second one is inputs or the resources that is used. So resources as well as technology. So technology and resources. So technology and resources are used by a certain economy in order to produce an item. So what is the maximum amount that can be produced? Okay, so that maximum amount or the maximum efficiency is basically symbolized or represented by this production possibility frontier curve. Okay, so we must know that in an economy there is some limitations or a fixed amount of technology, fixed amount of fixed scale or fixed level of technology as well as resources. Based on it, this curve is presented. Say for an example, I am giving an example of it. Say for an example, there is an item A. If a nation, X nation or X country, so that X nation basically by using its all resources and technology, it produces a 100 unit. Okay, 100 unit. Okay, now if it wants to produce B, then it needs to reduce the amount of A by certain amount. Say for an example, now A is reduced to 90. So 10 units of A is reduced, and by using the resources that is used in order to produce 10 units of A, now it has been transferred to produce B. So here you can have, say for an example, 8 units. 8 units. Initially now if we put in curve what we can have, this is the x-axis and this is y-axis. Now when A was produced 100 units, so at that time B was 0. There was no such kind of existence of B in it. Okay, no existence of B. Now when A is reduced to 90, now there you can have certain 8 unit of B came. So that's the first unit. So similarly, so we have different points if we proceed throughout this graph. So here you can have a certain line. So that produces the PPF, the maximum efficiency used by a country in order to produce a certain item. Now here we have only a limited case. Here we are considering only 2 items are produced in a nation. So it is a very limited aspect of representation of PPF, but it is very much useful. How it is useful? Look into it. Say for an example, this is a car, PPF car. Now, when a nation of a like X country X, okay, its PPF curve is that AB is the curve, and there is a certain point small a. So when we are considering small a, say for an example, so say for an example, it is 8 units, and here it is 30 units. So in this particular point, the economy is running in its full capacity and producing 80 units of A and 30 units of B. So that is there in its full capacity. That's very important, full efficiency. Now, when a particular point lies below this particular line, then what happens? So in this line, say for example, small b. So here at the point B, okay, so at point B, so economy, okay, here economy is underperforming. It's not performing to its maximum efficiency. But say for an example, there is another line. C is there, the outside the curve C. So here, this particular line C is unattainable. It is unattainable by the nation, by the country, by the economy. So that this particular economy cannot reach to this particular point C. Of course, there is some conditions we can have certain situations where it can reach when this particular curve is shifted. Okay, so there is small a and this is small a. If the curve is shifted, so there are certain conditions when this curve is shifted. Here we will look into the other aspects of it. This is a primary representation of PPF. This is a primary representation of PPF. But here the second one is, say for an example, we need to know the slope of it. So if it is a curve, this is x-axis and y-axis. If we have, say for an example, 2 parameters are there, and that 2 parameters basically represent this particular curvature. And here we have A, B, and C points. Now in curvature, if we want to have slopes, then at certain point we need to draw a tangent. We need to draw tangents like this. Now then we have to find out this tangent, the value of these tangents. Here it is positive, here it is negative, and here it is 0. We know that whenever we try to find out this tangent or slope, then what happens? If this is the curve, okay, now if we want to find out the slope of it, like from A to from B, so we have, this is C. So we have, this is BC and this is AC. So here tangent will be BC by AC. So this is the formula we need to find out. So this particular thing produces the actual value of the slope. Now in this curve, at this particular point, like up to this point, you can have both the parameters is rising, whether it is x or y, both of them are rising. So here you can have a positive slope. Here this is stagnant, both of them are stagnant, that is 0. Here it is declining. Here someone is increasing and other one is decreasing. So here you can have a declining trend, so that is negative slope. So these are all about the slope. And similarly, consider there is a PPF. Now in that PPF, the movement is very important. We can have 2 types of movements. One movement is along the curve and other one is shift. Okay, so when a certain point is moving on the curve, like from A to B, C, D, E, so this is the movement along the curve. when it is shifted, shifting means A to A dash, B to B dash, C to C dash. So we can have a whole new PPF curve or another curve. So when from this curve to that, so this is called shifting of the curve. So we know that along the curve, if the movement is there along the curve and then there is the shifting of the curve. We must have these common ideas of graphical representation of different parameters in economics in order to find out the relationships between different parameters, which will be very much helpful for us to dive deep into the deeper concepts of it. Now, here so far we know that there is PPF, definition of it, and in graphical representation of it, we have the movement along the curve, and second one is shift of the curve, and the third one is slope. And slope may be positive slope, zero slope, as well as negative slope. So these three concepts are gone. Now based on it, how it is useful, how the PPF is useful. Like, say for an example, in PPF, what you can have, there is X and this is the Y axis. This is the PPF. And say for example in Y we have luxury goods, and here we have necessity or necessary goods, which are very much required. So necessary good and luxury goods. So when the country is poor, its necessary goods as well as luxury goods, the ultimate maximum reach of it, it is confined to this limited way. If the country is rich, so that is a poor nation, and this is a rich nation. So the rich nation, why it is rich nation? Because all its resources, if it uses all its resources in order to produce, whether it is necessary goods or luxury goods, always its amount of it will be always higher than that of this B. So say for example, this is the A and this is B. So B PPF curve is of a rich nation and A PPF curve is of a poor nation. Why? Because this B curve, if it uses all its resources in order to produce luxury goods, whether it is luxury goods or necessary goods, the amount of it is always higher than that of the A. Then it is poorer nation, then again poorer nations. So we can have a graphical representations, okay, and a basic comparisons between two economies by using this PPF. Another significance of this PPF is very important. That is, say for an example, this is the PPF curve, and here's it is an apple. Say for example, this is an apple and it is an orange. It is orange. So if a nation, say for example, it is a Y nation or Y country, it's producing apple as well as oranges, and this is the PPF curve, and it is, say for example, it is 100, and here it is 70. So if this particular Y nation uses all its resources to produce apple, then it can produce apple 100 units. If it uses all its resources to produce orange, then it can produce orange 70 units. So there is a certain point, say for example, point A. So this is 80. Say for an example, this is 80 and this is 55. So if we have this country is in this particular A point at a certain financial year, at a certain point of time. So some policymakers are there in order to decide that its economy must rely on A, must be seated on A, must be there on A. Why? Because the policymakers think that in the economy, 100 apples is not required. We require, what is required? We require 80 units of apple and 55 units of oranges. That's the requirement. Okay, so that's the requirement. So policymakers decides. So based on the PPF's positions, we can be able to find out people's people's demand pattern. So people's demand pattern can be understood. People's purchasing power. Okay, so people's purchasing power can also be understood by it. So this is the significance. So this is the significance of this PPF. Okay. So far we have learned what do you mean by PPF. So what is PPF? Okay, graphical representation of it. That is what is PPF. Then graphical representation of it. Then we know that the movement along the curve, shift or slope, and then there is significance. So these criteria, so these three aspects of PPF is done so far. Now come to the relationship between there is product market, and there is factor market. Now there you can have consumers and there is firms or business units. Okay, so there you can have four aspects. So in general, in an economy, we have consumers or buyers or the demand raisers as well as firms. They are the suppliers. They can be acted as both in different markets, like demand raisers as well as suppliers. How? Now in product market, what do we have? We have apple. Say for example, in like products, apple, oranges are there in it. Okay, we have oranges. Then there is chips. Okay, we have oranges. We have chips, etc. Different products. Now in factor market, the factor of productions, like there is land, labor, there is capital. So these are there in market. Now say for example, consumers. As a consumers, what we do? We basically go to the product market and we create demand. So we create demand here. And who supplies this product? The firms or the producing units. They supply. So in product market, a consumer is acting as demand raiser and the firms are or the production units are behaving as supplier. In factor market, what happens? Firms basically raise demands. They raise demand. They produce that if we give you land, if anyone gives this firm land, labor, capital, they will provide certain like wages, inflation, etc. So we as a consumers go to this market and we supply ourselves. So we basically supply this labor. As a consumer in factor market, what we do? We are nothing but a merry laborer. So we basically supply our time and working efficiency to this factor market, and this demand is raised by the firm. So this particular relationships is very much important, whether it is consumer or firms. Both of them are acting as demand raisers as well as supplier based on the market in which they are interacting. Okay, so simultaneously in an economy we can have this cycle is going on. So it's very important to understand different aspects of this cycle. Now here we have next aspect, that is demand curve or demand schedule or demand curve. we have supply schedule or supply curve, and there is a condition of equilibrium. Okay. Equilibrium in the market. First comes the demand. What is demand? Say for an example, this is the price and here it is the amount of a certain product. Consumer basically raises demand. Consumer basically long for different items in product market. So we look into a product. So this is a single product. Okay. For your convenience, say it is an apple market. So in an apple market, where prerequisite conditions are like there is perfectly competitive market. The market is perfectly competitive. So perfectly competitive market, and items are homogeneous. Homogeneous. Like apple means you are treating or you are looking into making a curve of similar type of items, and it is perfectly competitive. Means there is huge number of buyers as well as huge number of sellers. There is no monopoly in it. Okay. Now when price, now from the side of consumers, so demand is raised by consumers. Okay, so from consumer point of view, what will have if price increases, then of course the amount that is demanded by a person will go down. So as this is the price and this is the demand, say for example, from this point starts. Now as the price increases, okay, so demand will fall. As the price increases, demand will fall. So we have a curve like this. So this is a demand curve, and we can have that it is a negative curve. As we move along the curve, we can have one of the parameters is going down and other one is going up. So both of them are not positive. Someone is going up and someone is down. So inversely connected. So here price and amount is inversely connected from the point of view of consumers in its demand curve. So this is the demand curve. Remember it. And the next is the supply curve. Supply is there in a product market. Who supplies? Business firm. So firms are the supply. So from the point of view of firms of a certain product, if we have same price and this is the amount, and it starts from this, what will happen if price increases? Then from firm's point of view, they will always try to supply the larger amount of things in the market, keeping in view to have higher amount of profit. So both of them are increasing. So here we have a positive curve. So the demand curve, that is with respect to the consumer, is negative, and the supply curve, that is with respect to the business firms, are positive in nature. Now if we simultaneously produce both the parameters, here it is price and this is the amount, we have a demand curve, that is D, and we have a supply curve, this is S. So this intersection, what it signifies, this is, say for example, E. So this E signifies in a product market, in an economy, you can have a certain point of a definite product where the amount demanded by the consumer is equal to the amount supplied by the supplier. So that is the equilibrium concept in an economy. Now this equilibrium may go up and go down. So based on the curve, what we have, if it shifts, we can have equilibrium changes. If the demand curve shifts, D1, D2 and D3. If demand curve shifts, we can have equilibrium E1, E2 and E3. Similarly, if supply shifts, demand curve is same. If supply shifts, what you can have? Similarly, E1, E2 and E3. Okay, and both of them can shift simultaneously. Both of them can shift from this point to that. So it will depend on the nature of the economy as well as the market in which way these curves will move, shift, and etc. Now the next concept is about the market failures. Market. This is market failures and government response. Okay, so market failure and government response. So what are the possible ways where the market fails? First one is monopoly. If there is monopoly, okay, if there is monopoly in the market, then definitely there are chances of failure of the market. So how the government react or manage to eliminate this monopoly? The government will always promote the perfect competition with large number of buyers as well as sellers in the market. In case of India, we had MRTP Act 1969. Okay, so this MRTP Act, it was a monopolistic statutory law. Later on, in order to promote further competition, we had Competition Act of 2002. So there was MRTP Commission to look into the different aspects of it. Similarly, we had Competition Commission based on the statutory act that was enacted in 2002. Also, it is the primary response from the side of the government in order to reduce the monopoly. Second is externalities. Externalities. Externalities means outside the periphery of economy, if anything happening and that is impacting adversely the economic aspects. Say for an example, we have environmental degradation or environmental pollutions and etc. So if it happens in an economy, then how government reacts? In case of India, we have Wildlife Protection Act of 1972. We have Forest Conservation Act FC of 1980. We have Water Pollution Prevention Related Act, Water Act of 1974. We have Air Act 1981. So these are the statutory norms promulgated and put forward by the government in order to reduce the adverse impact of the externalities so that we can have the better economic outcome. Okay, the second one is externalities. Okay, now here we have, okay, now the third one is very important. It is now the third one is very important. It is inequality. It is inequality. If inequality prevails in an economy, so there is a chances of failure of the economy. Now, in order to cope up with this inequality, government put forwards income. Okay, government put forwards income redistribution in the form of taxes. Okay, in the form of taxes. Second, we have in the form of welfare schemes. And the third one is very important, direct benefits. Like we have direct benefit transfers are there in it. Welfare schemes, like we have different expansion of the public services. Say for an example, health, education, etc., social securities, etc. So these are the responses from the side of the government in order to cope up with the adverse impact of inequalities in an economy. And the last one is very important in market failure. The fourth one is macroeconomic instability. If macroeconomic instability comes, then same government as well as other wings of it basically come up with fiscal policies as well as monetary policies. We'll look into it. Like when there is inflation occurs, Say for example, when inflation occurs, when unemployment occurs, then how to deal with it? Okay, how to deal in short term as well as long term. Government will go for tax increase of the tax, as well as apart from that, we can have like in case of unemployment, we have short term as well as long term initiatives will be taken by the government. So these are the concepts so far we have known. First one is PPF. The second one is very important, the relationship. Okay, so the relationship between product market, then there is factor market, consumers as well as business firms. Third one is demand curve, supply curve as well as equilibrium. And the fourth one is market failures and government response. Okay, so all these things were covered in this particular video. So that's it from the side of the part 2 of the elementary fundamental concepts of economics, and in due course I will be uploading the next part of it that will cover other fundamental concepts of economics. Thank you.